So, Nat, I was at a party the other night. You might have been there as well.
What? We were at a party? How late
We
did
did.
you stay at the party?
Not late. I was in bed by 10. Anyway, but I did make it to a party.
At
But
about
I
8:30, I
just
was harassing your son on his girlfriends.
good, good. Do tell. Oh, I want to hear all the goods.
His
Anyway,
friend was actually very tangentially. His friend was actually very cute because I said, "What about you?" And his friend was like, "I'm married to the game. I haven't
ah,
found the one yet." And I was like, "Man, you are going to be exceptional at PR when you get to that stage in your
no.
life and you're professional footballers." He had the right snappy one-liners that were so charming. I was like,
Can
"Oh,
I
you're so
just can I just say these lads are actually all very charming these days. My son, who's 18, and his 18-year-old friends. The first one I said to a friend of his who is so sweet, highly introverted. He's a sweet guy, and I said to him, "So, what do you think about this whole girlfriend business? With Grayson?" And I just was fishing a little bit, and he looks at me and he goes, "Kristen, if Grayson's happy, I'm happy." And then the other one,
oh my
Grayson's
god."
got this. For anyone else who's got 18 or 19-year-old boys right now, they've got these little skinny little mustaches. They're all trying to
Oh,
grow
I did clock
mustaches.
them. I clocked
That's really
those
bad.
Spartans.
It's really bad. And I said to another lad, and I said, "What do you think about Grayson's mustache?" And the friend, like these lads have each other's backs. He goes, "I think he looks magnificent." And I'm like, "Yeah, they do. They're just charming and they have one another's back. So go them. Go these lads." But speaking of lads, at this party, I got into an interesting conversation, which really riled me up. And I didn't have a response at the ready.
Kristen came over and was like, "Don't go over there. You will
Yeah,
hate
what do
it."
they call it in New Zealand? Rarked up? They rarked
Yeah,
someone up or
rocked up.
something? Is that what
Yeah,
you say? How do you
rocked
spell
up.
that? How do you spell it?
I wanna say RARCKED, but I don't know if it's an actual
I
word.
know. Or is it like
Racked,
WR
RACK?
rarked? Yeah. I
I
was all
wonder if it's
rarked
based
up.
on rugby because rugby is a ruck. I wonder if you got rucked
Yes.
up or something.
Okay. All right. Well, I was rarked up and I was all rarked up for like the weekend and it's still bothering me. And part of it is okay, setting the scene here. How do you talk to skeptics? Just set the scene. Gosh, that took us a while to get into that. But here we are, 2 minutes in. And what we want to chat about today, off the back of allies last week. Allies have been on our minds, but now skeptics are on our minds because ultimately, an ally is someone that has at some point chosen to become aware of an issue and has come alongside and wanted to help. And I think skeptics can actually be some of your strongest allies should you choose to have a conversation with them in a productive manner, be really curious, and learn from one another. And so we want to chat about skeptics today and how you chat about them. And this lends nicely to the story on Friday. I first want to say that this person was inebriated. So we were in no position to be having any conversation, which is why I decided, you know what? No matter what I say, this guy is about 6 feet tall and he was positionally had a dominant stance over top of me, like looking down over top of me, which has happened several times in my life, had clearly had a few drinks and was not about to change his opinion on matters. But it did get me thinking, had we been in a more different environment and perhaps sitting and having a coffee or something, how might I have engaged a skeptic? So I first just want to say that when I introduced this came off the back of when I introduced what I did, which was Powrup, professional development for women. He then proceeded to go off. Oh my gosh, professional development for women. Women have everything. They're outstripping men on every metric. They are going to absolutely smash men. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. And that's where I was like, what do I do? Where do I go from here? This is all very awkward. And then I was getting hot under the collar. And then it became like a competition must win thing. And then after about 5 minutes, not even 2 minutes, I was like, what is the point? There's no point getting into this conversation. But I did actually have to do research afterwards. And so because I was like, on the spot, perimenopause brain, I just need some of these stats in my brain for this. And I think where he was coming from, and this is true, there's been a really strong sentiment of, but what about the boys and the men, and they're being left behind? And a lot of people hang their hats on a few things. Men, yes, are struggling academically, equally with mental health as well. So that is true that men aren't going as well as maybe, I don't know, they used to. And secondly, women are outperforming men in the academic environment and are entering and exiting university at a greater rate than men right now. So fewer men are getting degrees. So all of that is true. Um, and yet, and yet, that has been happening since the 80s. So that's so interesting. I found that 40 years of graduate dominance, and yet we're seeing no catch ups anywhere else in the workforce. In fact, women outnumber men in undergraduate studies of 30 out of 36 OECD countries. I think that's 38 countries that have kind of come together. I think it's like organizations like economic development countries or something, like countries that have come together and they're going to study patterns of humans and the workforce like as a cohort of countries. So out of 38 countries, and of those countries 51% of women hold a tertiary degree versus 39% of men. And yet, women hold just 29% of C suite roles out of these 38 countries, which is really interesting. And we had a big chat about the broken rung, but anyway, I'll stop there. Any thoughts, Nat? And I would love for you then to go into the broken rung.
I'm going to start with two very important notes. OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. It's an international forum of 38 democracies that works
Yeah.
to promote economic growth, fair global trade, and sustainable development. So
Thank you.
obviously that's a bunch of different countries, including New Zealand. But more importantly, Rack Up, as of the 27th of September, 2025, it has made it into the Oxford English Dictionary. It is a New
Since
Zealand
when?
slang term.
Since when? 20.
27th of September last year.
Okay, so what is it?
Also added was Cuzzy Bro, Hapu, Lux, Morena. Morena is good morning in Māori. Rack up, sweet ass.
How do you spell
And a
rark?
couple more.
Rark up.
Arark. I am New
Nice.
Zealand, except I added a
Great.
C that was unnecessary. So very un-New
Thank you.
Zealander to add
Thank you for
extra
that.
letters. Because we like to
Okay.
remove our, what do we remove? Our vowels. We just go,
Yeah.
we try and keep English as short as possible.
Yeah.
Um, so
Efficient.
now that's out of the way. Yeah, it is. This is when you said, and this is, we're going to get into this, but when you said, he said, women are outperforming on every metric and they, the tables have turned, the classic argument. I find that, I mean, my first question is always like, tell me what they are. Like, please tell me, because I think what you've just mentioned with schooling, you can flip all these metrics whichever way you want to, because you can say, wow, women are outperforming men when it comes to education, or you can say, wow, women are overrepresented in education and underrepresented in financial success, or overrepresented in student debt burden.
Mm.
And starting with especially if it doesn't work, especially like to me, this is where stats, and we know this, what is it, stats, damn lies, damn lies, and statistics. Like, you can
Mm.
say, wow, women are doing amazing when it comes to education, but if that's not correlated with success in the career field, then what are we actually achieving? Not a lot, because it means there's something broken there, which means that stat on its own doesn't do anything. And that
Mm.
kind of does bring us to that broken rung. And this is again, everything when we talk about this area is pretty nuanced. The broken rung is the description of that very first career rung on the career ladder. So we all enter, and in roughly equal numbers, all genders enter the workforce. And when it comes to that very first promotion from graduate entry level roles into sort of a first manager experience, manager position. And I've heard it described as that, which I find very interesting, because I'm like, entry level roles actually lead up to quite senior roles before you go into a manager position quite often. So I'd like to dig into how that works. But
Mm.
effectively, for every 100 men promoted, only 89 women are. And when you think we've entered the workforce in pretty equal numbers, in fact, I think there's slightly more women entering the workforce than men. And we are talking about that very, very first step up. The fact that it is already a big jump, like you can say 89, that's an 11-person difference out of 100 people. That's like, substantial when you play that out over even just one organization. If you have 100-person organization like that, actually you just start to see fewer and fewer women. That also sends a really interesting signal. There's probably lots of reasons for that. There's lots of in-baked biases in those roles. When you're stepping up into those roles, often correlates with a time a lot of families and parents are thinking about having their first children. So there's like a perception of needing to opt out, or even being told to opt out, or perceived to be needing to opt out. They feel like a risk from an organization's perspective. So there's lots of different reasons why that broken rung exists, but there are also some massive consequences of it, because you are starting to see the stats around you not
Mm,
shaping up in your favor.
yeah. I was really curious about the why, because I just feel like the more we can, if that is and a critical, what is it? I mean, it compounds, doesn't it? So if it is a critical inflection point that sets women back, and we address, things throughout women's careers at Powersuit, but if that is the first slip up per se, surely we can get really curious as to why and start to address that. And I was just looking at a few little reasons of why in research. And I had a note here about sponsorship. So, sponsorship gaps start pretty early. So, senior people who are mostly men tend to sponsor people who remind them of themselves. And so, you've got the young lads starting their careers out, and it's you think, oh, it just reminds me of me at that position. And had I just had someone, or maybe they did have someone, so I'm going to just lend a hand. And so I think that is an inbuilt bias that you talked about. Like, that person reminds me of me. I'm going to give them a helping hand.
We
And
call
given
that
that,
the mirrortocracy. We look in
yeah,
a mirror and we like
mirrortocracy. Yes,
apparently
love
also
it.
why dogs look like their owners a lot of the time, because we have a bias
Mm,
towards liking how we look. So people
yes.
get dogs that look like them. And now I see dogs that don't look like their owners, and I was like, "You hate yourself."
Well, I just have to say, I tried to get a blonde Cocker Spaniel,
I know you would
because
have,
I
but
think I
she
would.
still looks like you. So,
Oh, cute. Okay,
oh yeah,
Dum
you
Dum.
and
She's a
Juno look
Dum
the
Dum. We
same.
call her
It's
a
just
Dum
that
Dum.
she's
So
the
anyway.
brunette.
Okay. All right. And okay, prototype. Here's more, yet more bias. Prototype of manager is still male. So when you close your eyes and you think nurse versus doctor, all these things, astronaut versus, I don't know, caregiver, you still have a typical prototype idea, of what a man does and what a woman does. So yet more bias. Women are given more non-promotable work, even at that level, asked to collect lunch, asked to write notes. And so they are put in a box of more administrative tasks, over strategic work, and self-advocacy. And this is all socialization of girls, being taught, to be quiet, get your work done, and, don't over advocate for yourself, or the double edged sword of that, and what that does look like when a woman does advocate for herself. So, anyway, I just wanted to remind myself of that,
Yeah,
because I think that's really helpful.
that's nice context. And we
Yeah.
did a bunch of events last week, and one of the questions we asked people was who in the room has been told that they lack confidence, not thinking that they lack confidence themselves, but told. And in the two rooms we asked it, I would say well over 50% of the women put their hand up. In
Mm.
the one in one room we had probably a little bit more of an equal mix of allies in the room. The other was a bit smaller. None of them put their hand up. Then no men put their hand up at all. I think it was a grand total of 0 men had been told in the rooms we were in that they'd lacked confidence, whereas at least 50% of the women had somewhere along the line. And so when we talk about that prototype of what a manager looks like, some of these factors, there is a perception clearly that women lack confidence because it shows up differently. And I've said this a lot, even when we have allies in the room, we might have talked about it last week. They tend to congregate together, and we don't perceive that to be a lack of confidence. We see that as sort of a very valid safety mechanism. But when
Yeah.
women often are in rooms on their own, and behave like that, we see it as a lack of confidence. So there's like all sorts of biases that come into it. I think I want to go back to your story about this guy,
Mm.
because while I think that it's a really shocking display of, what's the word, entitlement? Like, in what other world Do you, I mean, I even imagine if you were like a cigarette company executive, how many people would openly and aggressively challenge you? And it's such an interesting, like, it is interesting because I think we've both been in this position since starting Powersuit. The challenges people feel really comfortable to throw at you upon meeting you, knowing nothing about you, very much like, and they do sort of boil down to it's not needed. There's this real sense of it's not needed. And the second one is often, but that's such a small market. Why, why are you only dealing with 50% of the population? Which
That
I
was
think
actually, he started that. He did
he started
say,
that behavior. Yeah.
oh, because he was a startup guy and he said, "Oh, so hang on a sec, you're narrowing your market to 50% of the population."
Yeah.
And I said, "Yeah,
We
I know,
are.
big market, eh?"
We are, bro.
But
We are
and
narrowing our
then
market.
and then he didn't like that, so then he had to tear apart the women are actually outperforming men. To answer your question, why, and getting curious about why a guy like that does that, is it entitlement or otherwise? It's worked for him until now. He is running a number of companies, well-known ones, I might add, that we would know. He hangs out in similar circles that we hang, like his behavior and approach to life is literally working for him. Maybe not on a personal level, but on a professional level, on all accounts, this guy's succeeding and his way of navigating through the world is working for him. And why would, like, yeah, I don't know. He's just never been forced to change his demeanor or his behaviors.
I agree. I think that is sort of half the equation of that sort of person, and that behavior is perceived to be assertive, confident, comfortable in conflict environments, all the things that we look for in leadership. But what it actually is dominating, bullying, and making other people feel very uncomfortable. So he's perceived to have be a lot more capable than maybe he is. I think that's one group.
Mm.
The other group that I actually find far more insidious, and I think a lot of men, and I'm saying men in this context, but I think if you bring ethnicity into this as well. You know, like if you think about how the world's made up when it's when we're talking about an underrepresented group or a group that hasn't had a fair playing field. The other group is what I would put in quotation marks would count themselves as the good guys, and I'm taking gender out of this. This is
Mhm.
the group that stays passive and silent. So equally, you could have said that to him, and I've been in this conversation before where they said, "What do you do?" and you say something, and they kind of not really shut down, but they don't really know what to say. You can tell they're sort of uncomfortable. They're not going to say actively anything against it, but you know that when they're off in a, again, quotation, safe space with people like them, they
Yeah.
probably have quite a different opinion. The reason I hate those people is I believe we have to have open debate and conversations around this stuff. And if you
Mm.
agree to someone's face or don't say anything to someone's face, and then behind their back or is sort of in general on this side of not agreeing with that stuff, you kind of create a really difficult position because you can't defend or you can't have this conversation. You've left, you know, they've put themselves in a position that they're always going to win and reinforce what they believe. And
Mm.
I just find that weak.
Mm.
It's
Yeah,
more polite at a party.
I can imagine that almost everybody that's listening to this episode has found themselves on the other end of a conversation like this. So I think we'll spend the next 8 or 9 minutes on how to talk to skeptics, but I just wanted to raise one more observation or two. And the first is that, as you know, I was in Japan earlier this year and learning both about Japan and South Korea, looking at it while there. And birth rates have fallen to historic lows in these nations, and actually the US is finding this as well now that they're curtailing immigration. Birth rates are plummeting, and so birth rates are falling to historic lows in these countries. And when asked why, the the culture is not set up so that men are involved in, it's the division of labor outside of work. So culturally speaking, women are tasked with raising their children and taking care of the household, doing all the cooking and cleaning and everything, and caring for the children, and therefore have to choose to put their careers on hold. Well, lo and behold, now we've got increasing numbers of women in university in those countries, and they're simply opting not to get married and not to have children because they do not want to put their careers on hold. So I think it's a really visible example of how the division of labor outside of work is really harming women. And that's that systemic problem. Like, even if men and women are graduating at the same rates and women are outperforming academically, if you still have a system that doesn't hold men to account with helping outside of work, well, we're still set up to fail, and or just simply choosing not to get married and have children. And the other thing I want to, it just flows through to policies of organizations who are rolling back flexible work, rolling back hybrid work, which is effectively harming and actually restructures are occurring to women. And all of these policies are harming women and their choice to actually have families as well as careers. So I
I
don't know.
um I think it's not just Japan. South Korea, I think, won the lowest population birth rate.
I think I said
And
that. I said both
Right.
countries. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and I was just having a quick scan of an article because they're actually starting to increase their birth rate. So it was at 0.72 per woman was their birth rate in 2023, and now it's 0.99. So some of the incentives that, because it's now a massive economic issue, they were very much worried about their population dwindling, which means no economic
Yeah.
growth, which means you slide
Yeah.
backwards. So the government plays matchmaker. So they run matchmaking events to connect people.
So stupid. I
Um,
mean,
I know, I was like, that's it's a
okay.
they offer
This isn't about
it
finding,
no,
okay. I
well, I
mean,
think they offer housing benefits. So you get,
great.
housing for newlyweds and new parents for about $1 a day. The idea is that young people living in these apartments will be able to focus on making babies instead of paying rent. There is a lump sum payment of about $2,000 for new parents, which increases to $3,000 for subsequent children, and a monthly allowance of about $100. There's also medical aid. A woman can try IVF up to 25 times per child born. One company is offering $100,000 per child, about a 60,000 lump sum. Just looking at some of those things, and I'm not going to deep dive into it now, but I find this stuff laughable because I'm like, we know we are hurtling towards a situation where this is the case globally because we
Yeah.
have made it too hard. And what tends to happen is we just keep lumping the burden on women, lumping it on women, expecting us to do everything. And then when it becomes an economic issue, putting in place quite extreme versions of the policies that would probably work. Now, putting aside the matchmaking, if you made it easier for people to be able to pay for childcare, to be able to
I
have
was just going to say, solve it. Universal free for childcare. Solve it. Solved. Done. Imagine if a woman can have a career and know that their children can go to childcare. And imagine, like, I'm like, what? It's not hard. Hillary, that was one of Hillary Clinton's things that she ran on actually at the time was universal childcare. Like,
I
just,
know.
it's
Childcare,
unbelievable.
and I think also we could re-examine some of the working arrangements that have been in place since the
Of
Industrial
course.
Revolution as a way
Yeah.
to make sure that we spend money and very much designed on one person being at home, all of that sort of stuff. I just find it comical because I'm like,
Yeah.
when we're having these conversations about what a leader prototype looks like, who runs the world, because the other one I've seen recently when it comes to, the stats about women is, what was the big conference recently and all the global leaders went and there was just like one woman there and all the rest of them were men.
Probably
And you're
Davos.
just like, this is like a classic of when you talk about the stats that women are winning on. Are any of them valuable? Are any of them the ones that you would want to be
I know.
leading the
So
charge on?
well, and let's chat about that now. So we've got a few points on how to talk to skeptics because you may find yourself on the other side of a conversation, ideally not with someone towering over you and drunk, but you will find yourself in a reasonable conversation. And so let's go through a few different ideas of how one might chat to skeptics.
I find this first one challenging, assuming positive intent. And I'm saying that
Yes.
because I've seen this with any area where change has been put on the minority group or the group that is being disadvantaged. And assuming positive intent often means assuming it's okay to be uneducated, assuming it's okay to have made it through life without properly critically thinking through the stuff, and also being really sensitive to the fact that often even starting these conversations sparks some level of defensiveness in other people. So there are two camps for this one, and there are people who very
Mm.
calmly and confidently own the fact that it is not their job to try and put a positive slant on what someone else thinks. I think you and I both fall probably in the other camp, which is all fine and good, and it is not your job, and you don't need to take it on. But if you do want behavior and mindset change to happen, you have to start by assuming positive intent, because no one in the world really has ever changed their mind by
Or
told that they're a bad person.
that's so fair, and I think that that's a loaded term in itself, isn't it? A positive intent, because that certainly wasn't a positive approach to a conversation. However, it was, is it assume ignorant intent? Like they just don't know what they don't know. So you're going into a conversation going, oh, no one's either had the conversation with them before. They simply don't know. I think making that assumption, at minimum, you can start that. And then the next tip, but fair points. Next tip is to start to get curious. And we say this a lot. And this is, I struggle with this one. And I'm going to reverse it to the very last point, which is don't try to win. And from someone who has come from a debating family who still debates, I immediately go into combative mode and I want to win that argument. See, look, I've even framed it as an argument. But I am like racked up by this point. So I want to win and put this person in their place. And so for me to get curious and start asking questions is problematic. But I am going to do that because that is the next step when you are having a conversation with a skeptic, is to start inviting questions, to start asking questions so that they find the gap themselves. And almost through questioning, make an invisible problem visible. And so that is the suggestion. So, for example, I might have asked, how many women are on your leadership team? And is that not a problem at your organization? Or share with me all of, you know, these businesses that you run or invest in, and the representation across. Share with me more about that. And what do some of your female friends do as opposed to your men? And, you know, I could have just started to got curious about the immediate circles that he hangs with.
Yeah, I like that. And I've seen allies do this to very great effect, because often it's not what you ask, it's who's asking it as well. And to really just go, huh, is it? And I'm thinking of a specific person here who has been told something very similar, like women are winning on every stat. And he's gone,
Mm,
really? Oh, that's so interesting. So how many women do we have on our board? Huh. Okay, so
mm,
can you tell me why that means they're winning? And just like really no nonviolent communication, not being pass hag, just kind of drawing out some of that stuff.
yeah.
I'm going to go to my next one from here quite quickly, because the reason why I feel like sometimes that doesn't work is you're having two different conversations. You're having the conversation about representation. I suspect a lot of people who are in that mindset genuinely believe women don't want to be leaders. They should be at home with kids. They should be the caregivers. We're all created so differently. We should play to our strengths. And so I feel like you always end up sort of with a like, yeah, of course there's not enough women in the boardroom. Like they're off looking after their families and they play such an important role. And that's what my wife's done. And we're so lucky she can stay at home while I'm out working. So it is sort of like you end up having a conversation about two quite different things. So what I found works really successfully in the past, and I've got two ways that I've done this, and my new one, I'm so excited to share it, is
Mm,
flipping it. Tell them how hard done by they are by the situation. And what I have found is this immediately gets people on board. Like if you were saying, for example, in this case, we do leadership development, professional development for women. They don't like they certain groups have been conditioned to see themselves as the center of the universe, or just not build empathy for different things, and they
mm,
feel attacked and all that stuff. So then I go, in the past, I've gone, yeah, you must really feel this. What? And I'm like, well, I know when my sister had a baby and my dad would try and take her out and about, and he couldn't because there were no public bathrooms that he could take a kid into. Isn't that so unfair that my dad, just because he's a man, was not able to take a kid out in public? And they're like, what? Oh my
mm,
goodness, I can't do that either. And I'm like, I know, the system's rigged against you. And it's the same things with dads who want to go and join who want to be the primary parents. See if you can find yourself a group that not all women that you're going to feel really uncomfortable with.
mm.
oh my gosh, I feel so uncomfortable. I'm so left out. I'm like, yeah, I know the system set it up to exclude you. And it's so funny how quickly the conversation changes. And I find that like suddenly you're having a conversation where they're fighting for this change and you can just sort of nudge them in. My current one that I haven't tested yet, but I feel like this is a really beautiful example of positive change is I obviously get all my information from Instagram, and recently I've seen this beautiful rise in pints and ponytail sessions. They seem to be happening around the world, and the concept is very simple. There are a lot of incredible fathers. Most people believe millennial fathers will save the world, and they want to be proper co-parents. They want to be parents to their children. And the problem is most of them have never had long hair. And so they go and want to do their daughter's hair and they actually don't know how to do a plait or a ponytail or whatever. And
Mm,
they feel embarrassed because it feels like something you should know, and it probably raises all sorts of shame about how have I never learnt this, etc., etc.
mm,
So these groups now put on in a safe environment, men only. They can go have a couple of beers. They have these beautiful like fake heads, and each of them gets one, and they're like practicing all the different hairstyles in a very low stress situation. And when I am going to say this, I'm like, do you think it would make sense for women to be there? Like all these women who are really great, who have long hair, have done their hair for ages, or do you think that would make the men feel uncomfortable because now they're in a situation where they're getting their gap met, but now the group whose gap is met is infiltrating and probably way better than them or have a very different need or showing off or whatever it is, they will shut down. We know they will shut down. And vice versa is also true. So I feel like if you can flip it
I
and
like
position
it.
a gap from their side, you get them immediately on board.
I like it. I like it. And that lends me to another quick point, which is connect to something they care about. And the pints and ponytails, the fact that these men want to enter these spaces for their daughters, I love it. And we often find that the men who flip on power suit are those that have daughters and can picture
Yeah,
their daughters now in the workforce, and they genuinely want a workforce that is designed with their daughters in mind and actually therefore become allies. So connect to something they care about. So not only you could flip it, yes, and doing so at the same time would connect to something that they tangibly understand for the first time in their lives,
I
which
like
is their
that.
daughters. Yeah. Yeah.
And that would be when you talk about sometimes asking those questions is like, how would you feel if your daughter, purely through her gender, is less likely to get on the
Yeah.
executive team? I
Yeah.
feel very angry about that. Okay, well, let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
Well, which brings us to your final point, which you brought up earlier, is don't try and win. And I do think, do you know, it's so interesting. We do a couple of things on Power Suit that would be really relevant here as a finding common ground mini masterclass where you truly learn not to checkbox exercise it, but really put yourself in someone else's shoes, practice empathy, and really understand where they're coming from so you can influence from that position. Very, very powerful skill. But secondly, peer coaching. And like any great coaching, it's not about giving advice. It's not about sharing really your perspective either. It's getting incredibly curious about theirs. I always call it like research, trying to become an expert on their position or their
Yeah.
perspective. And if we treat these conversations like that, you do have a much higher chance of influencing than trying to convince. We all know this, convincing never works.
Yeah. When I think about what I might have done differently, let's assume the situation was slightly different. Again, not at a party, but I might have for me I might have taken a few things can be true at the same time. Like it is true that women can be succeeding academically, and it can be true that yes, some men are struggling, but equally it is still true that women are not leading in some of the key kind of outcomes as it relates to career success, in terms of leadership, in terms of pay, in terms of capital investment for female founders. Like these are all things where women aren't leading in the outputs of what is measured by success. And I might have just left it as, um, like, don't worry about it. Like, just don't worry about it. This is, like, don't worry about it. You don't need to get involved. I don't know.
Yeah, I was thinking there's a couple of things. I think you're bang on about time and place, and like, are you flogging a dead horse? Like,
Mm,
is it worth
mm,
doing? So I think there is like but I do think it's always worth having a little bit of a nudge, and
mm,
it's always good to practice these skills. But I also wonder if there's a second element to this, which is he was the embodiment of aggression. Like And this is something that's played out, I think we talked about
Mm.
on the podcast recently, where that guy walked into me when I was running, and just that like absolute arrogance of going, I own these streets and it is your job to move around me. And it was probably even subconscious. Like we talked about it at one of our events last week about just play chicken. Just don't assume it's your job to always move. And even if 50% of the time you just don't move around people, you
Mm.
start to realize like, wow, they really expect you to. And I wonder, and I will say all that because I wonder if in this situation there was another way of taking this conversation, which is like, oh, would it be okay if you stepped back a little bit? You're really leaning over me and quite has anyone ever told you that that comes across as quite aggressive, or just really
Mm.
calling him out on his approach and kind of flipping the conversation completely over to, and once off, like, who knows, like it could put you in an unsafe position. And again, if you are an ally listening to that, that is the top concern most women have in
Mm.
these
Mm.
in these situations. But it also could, sample size of one may not have that much impact. But if we all get much better as a gender, not better but more practiced at holding our ground and kind of calling out that behavior, I wonder if he would still manage to do what you've sort of explained, that this behavior hasn't impacted him at all because it's never called out.
Yeah,
It's never
I know.
seen as a bad thing. So I just wonder if that would have been another thing. And we probably all need a line in our back pocket that is like non-confrontational or whatever, but just kind of really clearly goes, oh, would it be okay to move back a couple of steps? Because this leaning over me is like quite aggressive.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's fair. There could have been a few ways, that I could deal with it, but, it was very therapeutic to talk about it, so here we are. So everyone, good luck with your conversations, getting curious, stating, the facts, and let's just keep talking about this.
And if you do have in your organization or in conversations, and you even, for example, are trying to build a case for power suit, we actually
Mm.
have a really good resource on that. Just flick us an email or find it on our website. That is for internal champions, and it includes some talking points and different ways to tackle objections as well. So
Mm.
just really nice ways to sort of build up your toolkit of different ways to tackle different questions and push back and in a positive, well-intentioned way.
Yeah, love it. Check out powersuit.com, everyone. Share this episode with your friends and your colleagues, and we will catch you all next time.
I just want to ask a question
Bye.
before we
Oh,
go.
yes?
If someone paid you $100,000, would you have a baby?
No.
So
Like,
you
have
wouldn't.
someone else's baby be a surrogate?
No, you're South Korea. If you were living in South Korea and now you got $100,000 per baby, would you do it?
No. Babies cost $1,000,000 over a lifetime, so no.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I'm going to dig into whether those incentives I mean, they're obviously working to a
I mean, it's
degree.
gonna cost you another 900,000, so what do you say? Would you have a baby if it's gonna cost you 900,000?
I wonder though if the gap that people are trying to fill, and I've heard a bit about, is actually those early year gap where that's where a lot of the expense comes and the like pain is felt, and that 900,000 you're both earning money, and like it could easily be that that feels less painful than that first $100,000 or so when you're like, one of us isn't even working, and no, I was just curious because I kind of don't think I would have one. But I don't think about the money side. I'm more like the having this stupid foster puppy, and I'm like getting up twice a night. It's like I don't think. And actually, my sister wants another puppy, and the more I've shared about this one, the more she's like, I don't think I could cope doing another newborn up at night situation.
I
And I was
did. I
like,
did question my life when we got Juno. I was like almost out of children, and then I went and got a puppy. So yeah, I still question my life choices, but here I am. Here I am, self-sabotageuress. Yes. Okay, everyone. We'll catch you next time. Bye.
bye.